Welcome to Managing a Windows 2012 Server Environment. I'm your instructor, Robert McMillen. The study materials we are using come from Inside Out Windows Server 2012, written by William R. Stanek. This particular module is going to be Part 4, Lab 2, Managing Windows Server 2012 Networking and Domain Systems. In our last section, we talked about TCP/IP and DHCP. This time, we're going to talk about the Domain Naming Service, or DNS. DNS is the cause of 95% of all connectivity problems, an incorrectly configured DNS, that is, or one that is having problems. DNS is managed using the DNS Management Console, which we're going to get into. DNS consists of zones, both forward and reverse. So a forward lookup zone, it allows you to ping an IP address, and we'll just go ahead and start that right now. So if we ping, then we ping a name and we get an IP address. That's a forward lookup. Now if we ping an IP address, -A, that does the reverse lookup, we can see that it does a reverse lookup. So we pinged forward, got the IP, we pinged the IP address, and we got the name. That's forward and reverse lookup in its actual usable form. DNS Zone Types. There are multiple different types. You can create an Active Directory integrated zone that replicates to all other domain controllers in your domain. A primary zone can also be Active Directory integrated, or it can be non-AD integrated if you have a zone that doesn't require replication to other domain or their DNS servers. A secondary DNS zone allows you to have a zone that's on a server in another location or the same location. It's up to you. Usually it's a separate location, and it keeps a copy of everything that's on the primary zone. The difference is you cannot make any changes to that secondary zone. It's a read-only copy. So if any updates happen on the primary, they get pushed out to the secondary fairly quickly. A stub zone is a little bit different, whereas a secondary zone is good for an office that has a slow or unreliable internet connection back to the primary zone with very few changes. A stub zone is used when you have a reliable internet connection back to the primary location, or you have a lot of changes, or both. So if you're constantly changing DNS host records, a stub zone is better because it's instant. It looks right back to the primary zone. It keeps no copy of the zone on the stub zone itself, like a secondary one does. So it just looks right back to the primary every time you make a request. So once again, secondary read-only copy for locations where you don't make very many changes or you have an unreliable internet connection. Stub zone, where you make a lot of changes to the primary, you have a good internet connection as well. DNS records come in A, which is your forward lookup records, like we just discussed. An A record would be mail.alltech1.com. A PTR is a reverse record, and when we pinged the IP address and we got a name, that's a PTR, or reverse record. And an MX record is a mail record. So that means that where do you want to send your email to alltech1.com? Well, you look up and see what the MX record says where the mail should go. Those are the three most popular. There's a lot of other type of records as well, but those are the three most popular records that you will create in any kind of DNS manager. So let's go ahead and take a look at DNS Manager. You can get there by going to the tools and just choosing DNS. And we'll see over here we've got forward lookup zones and reverse lookup zones. And we have trust points. Trust points is a new feature that allows you to communicate with other DNS servers that secure that communication with a certificate, and it is encrypted. And then you have conditional forwarders, which we're not going to get into this time, and we also have the logs itself. So the forward lookup zones, if we take a look at that, we see two different zones which are created by default. The underscore MSDCS, which means that this is a domain controller type of zone, and the widget LLC.internal. These records are basically the exact same records. There's a few differences, but the reason you see the MSDCS is because it's an Active Directory integrated zone that replicates with other zones. So if we go ahead and create a new zone, we'll do one that's not Active Directory integrated, and we'll say it's a primary. We'll uncheck the Active Directory integration because we don't need it to replicate. And this is going to be test.com. And you can see the file name is going to be test.com.dns by default. We can say allow dynamic updates or do not. And we will finish. So now we have test.com. You can see it creates a name server record for the parent server, which is DC01. So let's go ahead and create a new host record. Our new host record is going to be a computer called hello, and you can see it automatically appends to test.com. So hello.test.com, and we'll make it 192.168.0.122. Now we can also click to create an associated PTR record or reverse record, and click add host. It says it was successful. Click done. So now we see hello.test.com, and if we click on the reverse record, then we can see it created a nice reverse record for hello.test.com at the same IP address. So if I ping hello.test.com, we won't actually get a response, but it should resolve what the IP address is. And there it is. If we do a reverse, ping -a, you can see it does the reverse. So that's how you set up forward and reverse lookup records. Now we can also go and right-click and create other types of records. An alias or CNAME record will allow you to redirect a request. So if we wanted it to go to hello.test.com and then redirect to goodbye.test.com, then we could use a CNAME record to do that. We can also create the MX record we talked about earlier. So the host or child domain, we'll just leave it blank. And the fully qualified domain name of the mail server is going to be mail.test.com. There it is. Now we have to also create an A record for mail.test.com, or it won't know where that is. So we'll create, right-click, choose an A record. There we go. So now we have a new record called mail, and we have an MX record, so any mail that goes to test.com knows it needs to go to mail, which is at this particular IP address. So that's the different types of zones, different types of records, and then we can also click on New Zone and choose other types of zones. We talked about the secondary zone, the Stub Zone, and that's where you create those as well. So in summary, we discussed DNS and domain naming service, and in our next lab, we're going to be discussing managing Active Directory and security.